Welcome to week 11 of GLIAC Weekly. I am your guy, Witt, and I'm joined with my GLIAC expert, Tony Nicolette. Tony, are you ready? We're almost to the playoffs here.
Yeah, hard to believe it, man. I mean, these seasons go by in a blink.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I think about the fact that this is the last week of the regular season gameplay here, but here we are.
Here we are.
Well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about the games that were played this last week. We'll break down some of that. Then we will also go ahead and look at what are the chances for teams outside of Ferris, because Ferris looks like a pretty good lock right now. What's everyone else's chances?
Maybe.
Yeah, they might make the field, but we'll take a look at what are the chances of some of the other teams in the GLIAC and kind of what are some of the other big games to watch within the super region that could kind of impact how things land. So, Tony, let's go ahead and start off first, and we're going to look at kind of the outcomes that we have here, and then go ahead and talk through it a little bit. We've got Northern Michigan coming off of, they end up making some movement there.
Yeah.
With their
the coaching staff. Yeah.
And of course they go then and win a football game because that's how that works, right?
That is how that works.
And then Ferris State in a barn burner. We're going to talk about that one there with Saginaw. I don't think either one of us was shocked that Saginaw was able to punch with Ferris. I mean, that's right on brand with them the last few years. So, and then Roosevelt, of course, with an offensive explosion and blows the doors off Wayne State. Not sure we quite saw it exactly that way. And then Grand Valley and Tech in a street fight here, and in Grand Valley outlasts them. So
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's as we go ahead and we kind of break down these game by game, let's talk about the one that was the barn burner first. And Tony, I mean, Saginaw goes ahead and gets up. What were we at? 24-7, something like that?
24-7.
You know what? I'm over at Augustana watching Mankato in Augustana, and I get an update on my phone, and it mentioned the score, and I just went, why is it whenever I go to a game at Augustana, there's always something wild like this that happens?
Right.
And I'm thinking, my goodness. And so kind of fill in, what was your take on the action in this one?
So we talked about this going into the game last week on GLIAC Weekly, and we talked about how 3 of the last 4 games in the series coming in were decided by a score or less. And Saginaw Valley has consistently punched with Ferris. I think you characterized that perfectly. And we had seen just a couple of instances where, okay, maybe Ferris's defense is not quite as robust as it has been in different seasons. And can Saginaw maybe take advantage of that? And can Saginaw get enough stops with their knowledge of how Ferris likes to do things? Because it seems to have been that they can do that in the past. I mean, again, they held last year's Trinidad Chambliss-led outfit to 27 points. So, this is just one of those funny things that happens in the GLIAC is, Tony and East every year has to do this dance with a couple of the guys that used to work for him.
Right.
And for whatever reason, the schedulers have had the sense of humor to say, let's do that back to back. So, he did it this past week facing Ryan Brady against Saginaw, and he gets to do it against Sparky McEwen and Davenport here to close out the season this Saturday. So, I wasn't surprised that the game ended up being close. And I don't think that that's necessarily revelatory by any stretch of the imagination. The fact that Saginaw was able to get up 3 scores, okay, that's saying something. And then you have to sit there and look a little bit closer to say, all right, well, how did that happen? I don't think that there's a whole lot further that you have to look than for the first time all year, Wyatt Bauer had a rough day.
Yeah, no doubt.
He hadn't thrown a pick in his first 9 starts. He threw 3 in this one. He put the ball on the deck a couple of times that they lost it. And then you ended up seeing Chase Carter kind of end up having to be the guy for the better part of the second half. And he did a nice job of cashing in when Ferris needed him to, and taking care of some opportunities. Our Elite 100 guy, Justin Payout, gets a pick six on really the one big mistake that Mason McKenzie made all day. And you just saw Ferris kind of, and it wasn't even all that methodical. It's just like all of a sudden you look up and they got a lead, which that's, Ferris scores in bunches. So that's not.
Yeah, they're coming back, and then they get a pick six to pile it on and everything else.
Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't the fact that they ended up coming back. That's what's going to happen. Really, then the story became, okay, can Saginaw respond and start to trade blows the rest of the way? And of course, they managed to do that. So this was 38 at the end of regulation. Ferris gets a touchdown on one play with a Brady Rose halfback option, which everybody in the world probably should have seen that coming. But that's just another play in their playbook. That's like a dive play for them, relatively speaking. Yeah, sure. And then Saginaw works their way back down, gets it, and I think this was one of the things we talked about on the Sunday night show is. Was everyone surprised that Coach Brady didn't go for the deuce right there? And again, I was surprised he didn't. But again, you're at home, you kick the PAT, and you just go to the next session. I just don't think that's a bad way to look at it either. Hey, Saginaw wasn't able to do anything with their possession, and Ferris was from there, and the win streak continues for the Bulldogs. But yeah, this ended up being quite the knockdown, drag-out affair. I think both teams combined for 7 fumbles. Obviously, they didn't lose all of them, but the ball was on the deck, and there were lots of picks going on. But, it just we talk about this all the time, that Ferris State plays a very risk-tolerant style of football, and sometimes, you got to fight and scratch and claw, and when you're -4 in the turnover margin, you still find out a way to get a victory, and we saw that on Saturday.
Well, what's interesting to me is that Saginaw obviously had an overtime, ish contest with Grand Valley, where Grand Valley went for 2. Right before that one was coming to an end, and that was kind of that same type of decision where I'm going to try and either put an end to him right now or play for more football. I think now they would love to have that choice again, to have one play to end the football game, especially if maybe most people don't consider that you're the better team to play more football and continue to be better. But it's it's one of those things where a game like this comes down to a whole lot more than one decision at the end when there's this much scoring, especially
all day. Of course. And I think the big key difference to keep in mind too is, in that Grand Valley game, when Grand Valley went for that, there was still a minute left in the game.
Yes.
This is an instance where it was do or die and the game's over either way. Yep. But given the way that, especially even just on that on that possession from the 25 that they got it into the end zone, whenever they needed a couple of yards, they needed to make a play, the Ferris defense couldn't stop Mason McKenzie. And I just, he
got loose quite a bit.
It just seems like, boy, you got to have 2 or 3 good plays that you think you've got where you can get him loose and you can get those 3 yards when you need them in a situation like that.
Right.
You think you have that, but again, it's coaches know where they feel like, their advantages lie and don't lie, and their gut tells them what they need to do. So again, there's absolutely nothing wrong about kicking that PAT and then saying, all right, let's go get him in the second session. And it just didn't work out for him.
Yeah. And especially in a condensed field like that, where, trying to make that play as well. But heck of a ball game there, and hanging by the edge of our seat.
Yeah, it was a fun watch. It really was.
And, another, hang on the edge of your seat game here that we may not have seen exactly that way. Tony, what did you make of this? If it felt like, okay, things were kind of falling apart there as the week continued after our show, because this only, in Northern Michigan, that only carried on after we talked further.
Yeah.
but they show a ton of resolve and a whole bunch of want to here, huh?
Yeah, and believe it or not, this actually was a pretty fun watch too. This was another ball on the deck game. I think there were 6 fumbles in this one, which, when you run the option, when you pitch the ball around a lot, you're going to put the ball on the deck a few times. But this was one where, believe it or not, the carousel at quarterback continued for Northern in this one, and Trevor Turkoff took pretty much all the snaps, I think, in this one. They were actually a little pass happy. Like, I think they threw the ball 2 or 3 times on that first possession. And you think to yourself, geez, oh, Pete's, are they going for balance? What's the deal? And
right,
boy, as the game wore on, I think Northern really seemed to get the idea that, hey, if we just do our thing, it may take us 3 or even 4 downs to get those 10 yards, but we're going to get them almost every time. And I think over the course of the game, I think that's what you saw, is that in the trenches and just in the way they're executing that option, Davenport just could not get off the field consistently with it. And so, Northern was able to grind the clock. I think they held a 10-minute advantage in time of possession in this game. And Noah Dobert had another monster game. In their 2 wins this year, he's gone for 243 both times on the ground, and he had 4 tuds in this one too. So, the funny thing though is just over the game, you just saw again that, and I think this was similar to what we've seen out of Davenport a lot lately, is the offense kind of has a fits and starts kind of a thing to it. Sometimes they move the ball really well, and other times it just feels like, boy, it's just a struggle. I mean, they ran the ball pretty well in this game. I think they ended up with 161 yards on the ground. But as you were watching the game, it didn't feel like it was coming real easy for them. They really had to work for it. But this is a 28-14 game, I want to say, getting pretty late into the 4th quarter. And then, much like we saw with Saginaw at Davenport last week, they kind of ran a bit of a gadget play in a spot that I didn't think warranted it. Northern kind of did something similar here, where they ran like a reverse motion off of everything that they'd been doing all day and tried to run this weird reverse pitch thing. And sure enough, the ball ends up on the deck. Davenport gets a short field. They go in, cut the lead in half, and then Northern, I'm trying to remember exactly how it worked out, but I think Northern turned it over a second time and gave Davenport another short field. And so this game really that first turnover that Northern had that I was just talking about, they took over from their own 1-yard line, and they get a first down out into the teens. And I'm thinking to myself, there's like 8 minutes left in the game or 6 minutes left in the game. I'm thinking to myself, my God, they're going to drive this thing, and Davenport's never going to get the ball back, and the game's going to be over. And so they turn it over and actually let Davenport get a couple of shots to try and get back into it, which they did. And so I actually give Northern a lot of credit for, after giving up a 2-score lead when it looked like they almost had a chance to run the clock out, and still not wilt on the road after they let that team back in. I think that was, to me, the most telling thing about this Northern group and those kids, that, hey, coach changes over, everything else.
right.
They still had a ton of fight, and they said, okay, this didn't go. We kind of relinquished some control here, but we could still get what we want out of this, and they figured out how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you and I, as the weeks continue, we'll be doing our playoff shows upcoming. We won't be talking, about, frankly, either team, much more after this show tonight. I do have to ask you, with Northern, how do you think they approach the coach situation going forward? I mean, do you think that this staff is trying to kind of make a push here for maybe they have a guy in their group that maybe ends up becoming the guy, or do you think that maybe they just kind of move on from this point?
I honestly am not a smart enough guy to have any kind of salient answer for you there. I really don't know. I mean, it's hard to ignore the fact that this team has been infinitely more competitive over the course of their first 10 games than they probably were at any point last year.
Sure.
They've hit the pay window twice. And I mean, let's face it, Davenport, when going into that game, had a winning record. So, right. I mean, that's a quality win for Northern on the road, in a situation where, again, I mean, they scored the first 4 times they had the ball, I think. or maybe 4 of the first 5, and then the whole second half kind of went quiet, and still found a way to, grind one out. And so, I don't know if part of that is just the staff in total, or is it the group of kids that got recruited in? Yeah, I mean, there is going to be something to be said that there is a direction of this team that seems to be, at least away from what they were over the last couple of years. Whether that's enough to keep any of those guys there and Marquette running the show, I really can't answer that. That's a great question. And I guess we'll have to kind of sit and watch. And
it'll definitely be something to kind of. It'll be something that people will probably pay attention to, and
I would think so.
in GLIAC circles for sure. And
yeah.
Moving along throughout the games, we both felt like Roosevelt. We were leaning that way towards they just shown more this year overall.
Yeah.
But considering how bad their defense has been this year, and I'm saying that in a very candid way.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
For Wayne to only get 14 doesn't feel like the way that they want to end this year.
No, it really didn't. And I think, we've watched over the last stretch of weeks that Wayne's offense just does seem to struggle pretty mightily. We've talked at pretty good length about how, at least throughout a lot of last year, we felt like Champ Edwards really was the guy that you kept seeing him make plays from the quarterback position. And you think, okay, that's got to be their guy. And for whatever reason, I don't know if he's been banged up or what's been going on, but we've seen, Dylan Kress kind of went the distance for Wayne throughout a lot of that game. And we've seen, we saw Justin Fields, I think, not Justin Fields, Justin Cox, getting him mixed up with the Ohio State guy from the Jets. We saw Justin Cox last week and a little bit earlier in the season as well. And it's just one of those things where that lack of consistency at that quarterback position, I think, has just made it really hard for Wayne to get any kind of momentum going in any of these games. And so, this was I think it was 41-0 or 38-0 at one point before Wayne was able to get on the board. And the touchdown that they did to get on the board early, with the ball that Kress threw was a nice one. So when they protected him a little bit, he actually did make a couple of good throws in this game. But, at the end of the day, I just think across the board, Wayne's just, got so many things that they got to try and fix. Offense being one, and not the least of which is that, they gave up a ton of yards in this game, particularly via the pass.
Right. Over 300, right.
Well, yeah, over 300 combined, but Tony Chahino, he went over for 300 for the second straight week. So,
right.
The other thing to not ignore here is that Roosevelt has, at least over each week over week, they've kind of figured out what their identity is.
Yeah.
And Chahino's been kind of a nice find for them. And we knew coming into the season that he and Zach Zella, it was kind of between those two, and Zella had some good performances in the early part of the season, and then Chahino has been really kind of been the guy over the last half. And good on him for being able to put a couple of performances together these last couple of weeks. They didn't get the win up at Tech, but he sure looked good. And they were able to get up against somebody in this game that they actually could take advantage of some matchups, and a defense that's just struggling to get stops and get another victory in the column for them.
Absolutely. Moving on through the rest of the slate, we have the Grand Valley game with Michigan Tech. Game that Grand Valley was out ahead in, and then Tech pulls closer, and Grand Valley ends up kind of winning in the end. Kind of what was your take on this? Alex Bueno was back from what I had seen, right?
He was.
Okay, and so we thought that there was a real chance that he would be potentially limited by Grand Valley in terms of his ability to make plays with his feet and things of that sort. And I think that they had him under 50 yards, but didn't really get things cooking too much in the passing game. And on the other side with Grand Valley, their offense wasn't exactly prolific on this day, but I like more what I see out of Schuster than less.
Yeah.
And so kind of, you had a chance to see the game. What was your take on it?
The funny thing is this game kind of felt, in a lot of ways, very similar to the Saginaw Valley game, where you see Grand Valley's offense do some pretty decent stuff in the early going. They get a couple of scores, and they just never really were able to deliver the knockout punch. Every time you think, every time you think to yourself, okay, is this the drive? Because they find a way to get stops. Tech had one really good drive where they got the touchdown. They had another good drive actually where I think they could have taken the lead early. And we talked last week about Tech possibly kind of using the two quarterbacks. If Bueno was back, and they did. And so we saw some Elliott Larner in this game. He didn't throw it a whole lot, but they used him to run, and he had a fumble basically going in that Grand Valley was able to thwart an early scoring chance for Tech. But basically it was kind of, again, Grand Valley's up kind of that 13-7, 15-7 type of thing. And just never being able to get that momentum or get that drive finished where they could go out and actually get it up to 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns. You felt like Grand Valley probably had the better of it moving the ball on average or on the whole for the day. And yet again, they just weren't able to actually finish any of those drives. And after kicking a field goal finally to get it up to 2 scores in the fourth quarter, you could sense that Tech was kind of running out of time. And it was, I believe it was a 4th down where they were inside Grand Valley territory where they got a good play dialed up against cover 0. And Bueno just took it right up the chute and was able to get a touchdown to cut it down to what you ended up seeing for the final margin.
Right.
And the one thing that I will give Grand Valley some credit for in this game, though, from there is I think there were 2.5 minutes left, 2:40 maybe when that score happened. And Grand Valley was able to actually get the couple of first downs, a lot of it on the ground, mind you, to be able to run the clock out and not let Tech get the ball back. So even though this wasn't the most impressive offensive performance for either team, again, Grand Valley, at least in this one, for as much as it kind of felt similar to that Saginaw game, Grand Valley was able to do what they needed to be able to kind of close it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this was a game that Tech, I think, probably needed to have if they were going to kind of have a real, what we're going to consider a pretty strong shot to be right there at the end with the regional rankings. And I think with a win, I really think that they probably would have gotten themselves in that top 10, Tony.
If they didn't, they would have been damn close.
Yeah, I mean, because they're right. We'll look at this a little bit later on the show, but they're on the doorstep already, with a loss. So that tells me with a win over a team that's 500 or better, that would have put them up in there, I think. Now, is that going to mean that they were going to be on the 8 line making the playoffs? I'm not saying that, but all you can ask for this time of year is get yourself in that top 10, get to that final weekend, see what happens, win your own game.
Yep.
And you know what? You put yourself in a spot to get in the dance.
Well, and that's just it. And if they could have had this game and then, they're going to play another 500-ish team next week.
Right.
All of a sudden, if they end up 9-2 and they finished the way that they did, it would have been real hard to ignore them. They certainly would have made the 10 list. And do they get themselves onto that 8 line?
Right.
We'll talk about it, but I think you're right. I think you're onto something there. And I think Tech probably sensed that they still had what they wanted in front of them, that they could have gone out and gotten a couple of wins. And obviously this one, they just fell short.
Well, and finishing beating Grand Valley and Saginaw in consecutive weeks would be a strong ending as well. So
For sure.
Yeah. Well, as we take a look at the players of the week, Tony, unpack that for us, if you would, buddy.
Yeah, we've already talked about Noah Dobert. Again, this is the second time this year that he's been the GLIAC Player of the Week, and I think both times he had 243 yards exactly. So I don't know. Somebody needs to go on FanDuel or something and find a prop bet for that and see what kind of odds they'd give you for an odd thing like that. But he kind of won up. I want to say when he earned it. For his performance against Roosevelt a few weeks ago. I think he only had 3 touchdowns in that game. This one he had 4. And I think it's worth noting, too, that he's been kind of the main guy. The last couple of weeks, the Wildcats haven't had Jahai Wood And so Dobrik's been kind of that main guy that they've had to lean on, and he's lived up to the ask. And so definitely well earned for him. He's had a really remarkable season, and continues to lead the league in rushing. I mean, I think he's at 125 yards a game. So he's really had a great season. And folks in Marquette got to be excited about the fact that if they can keep him around, they still got quite a few seasons with him if they want.
Right.
So, because I think he's only a redshirt freshman. So, and then on the right side there, we got a couple of Grand Valley Lakers from that bare knuckle boxing fight that they had with Tech over the weekend. On the far right, punter Trace Hergich. I think this is his second one. Or actually, Michael Basic maybe got it last week. But Hergich did a really nice job. That was one of the things that we probably didn't talk enough about. Is part of the struggles that Tech had is they were kind of pinned a fair amount. They didn't have really great field position very often in this game, and so I think it did limit some of the options that Coach Metlack and his staff probably felt like they had to open up the offense a little bit. They weren't able to get as risk tolerant as they got, as they might be if they were starting, drives maybe at the -40 or near midfield or something like that. So the impact that he had dropping punts inside the 20, I think he did it 3 times, definitely had an impact on the game. And then in the middle there is Torian Wyatt, who kind of was all over the field for Grand Valley in this game. I mean, had the forced fumble, had the fumble recovery. If my memory serves, I think he tried to run that out of the end zone. That's the fumble I was talking about from Elliot Larner.
Yeah, he looks like a ball carrier right there, doesn't he?
Yeah, pretty sure Coach Wooster would have liked him to stay in the end zone on that one, because the Lakers ended up with pretty crummy field position as a result of it, but they did get the turnover. But had a couple of sacks in this game, and he was really all over the place. And they needed him too. No Anthony Cardamone in this game, and so Wyatt really played well to kind of fill that void and lead the Laker defense in a game where defense was at a premium.
And he and Cardamone, if I'm not mistaken, I think they're at the top of the league in sacks, or I think it's sacks. Now that said,
Jimmy Downs is the other kind of big guy in that linebacking core for
So. And now for those who aren't familiar with Torian, he's a guy that you don't hear his name as often as Cardamone, let's say, and stuff like that. For people who haven't heard his name much, is he a guy who's still got a few years left for the Lakers? Is he at the end of his stay, or I haven't heard much about him up until this point, and then I saw he got Player of the Week.
Yeah, no, he's out of the Metro Detroit area, and I'm pretty sure he's only a sophomore. So
that's what I thought. I thought he was an underclassman. Okay.
Yeah, so they're pretty excited about what his future can be in Allendale, given that he's able to start producing earlier in the arc at this point, kind of similar to what you saw out of some guys like Cardamone or Abe Swanson. It was usually that sophomore year where all of a sudden they started to pop.
Yep.
So Lakers got to be excited about that.
No doubt. That all said, let's go and take a look at the standings as we have them here. Ferris at 6-0. We didn't have this separation a week ago. We were talking a week ago. We had a lot of different scenarios with that now 4-2 crowd right there. Almost a separation in the league there between the 4-2 crowd and then the 1-5 or 0-6 crowd there.
Right.
I don't know if I've seen quite that defined a clear-cut separation in the middle of the league like that. You know what I mean?
Well, and what's funny is Tech, Davenport, and Saginaw were all 4-1, and all 3 of them got beat. So, because Grand Valley was actually a game behind them at 3-2 going into the weekend. So, the jumble kind of got thicker because of the way that shook out over last weekend. And then just so folks are reminded too, they see Northern and say, hey, wait a minute, isn't that another GLIAC one that they have? That game this past Saturday was actually a non-conference game. So the first time that Northern and Davenport played back in,
that's right. I think
it was week 4. Ended up being the conference game between those two. That ended up being a non-league. So the standings are indeed correct.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I
Straight
totally
from
get
the home office in Bay City.
it. Now, once again, GLIAC champs for Ferris. Tony, since COVID, how many times have they gone ahead and pulled that home? Is this 4 out of 5 years? Do I have that right with Grand Valley getting one in the midst of that?
No, I believe this is 3. I think Grand Valley
That's it.
got 2 of them.
There we go. Perfect.
I think Ferris got 21, Grand Valley got 22 and 23, and then Ferris took 24 and 25. But this is definitely the first time that we've seen this level of separation again. They're 2 games clear with a game to go.
Right.
It's real seldom that you see anybody get 2 games clear of the rest of the league in the GLIAC. It's usually you're down to the last weekend, and sometimes you've got as many as 2 or 3 or even 4 teams that could all have a shot at least earning a share of the title. So this is definitely the most definitive of the clearances that they've had.
Well, and when we were taking a look at, they've had an interesting year.
Yeah.
They start the year off. They're heading to spring ball. Everybody's coming back. They've got Chambliss back. The whole deal. This looks like it's going to be just a slam dunk. Well, then agents start offering some money around and really luring guys.
Right.
Jump into the portal, which is an entire dance in itself.
Wow.
And, they end up having a fair amount of turnover, but it ends up looking like it was going to be more turnover than it really was. And I felt like they still found a way to get a solid base under themselves, especially at the line of scrimmage, Tony, and still be very good there. And then they've had guys step up, the Wyatt Bowers of the world and others, and still have guys like Brady Rose and Carson Gulker who are guys who have been around through the wars and are veteran guys and leaders they can count on.
Yeah.
Along with that defense and guys like Payout and others. It's been a pretty interesting bumpy ride for a while, and Coach Anise has really found a way to still make sure that they came through this unscathed.
Yeah, and I would say that and you and I've talked about this certainly off air, but I think we've mentioned it on air too. Being able to keep Jarvis Wyndham and then the Anderson twins.
Yeah.
So basically keeping that whole segment of your line after losing Hattar and I'm trying to think of the other guy, Bryce George. After losing those 2 guys to Big Ten schools, to keep your other 3 core starters to that front 5 on your offensive line was really big. And they had a couple other guys coming up too that they really liked. And there's another guy who's starting this year that his name's escaping me, but there was somebody that was in the rotation last year that was heavy that they really liked. So that offensive line, for as much as you lose 2 starters, boy, when you really watch how they play and what they're doing this year, you could tell it didn't really impact them. And that's the years when Ferris has their best chances to go deep in the playoffs is when their O-line is really, really strong.
No doubt.
And so we've seen that several times over the last few years, and those are the years that have made the biggest impact. And I think we mentioned 23 was one of the years they didn't win the league, and I think that's the year they got knocked out of the playoffs in the first round. That O-line was kind of in I don't want to call it a rebuild, but it was just kind of figuring itself out to get back to being what we saw, let's say, in that 21 and 22 or the 21. It was the 22 season. So that's usually when Ferris is strongest, is when that O-line is really, really good, and they kind of got that going this year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And congratulations to Coach Anise and his group. Very impressive the way that they've come through, not just as GLIAC champs, but also undefeated. Through a fairly tough slate as well. So
yeah.
Which that kind of leads us to our latest top 25, Tony. Certainly Ferris is number 1. I think that's fairly unquestioned. And as we take a look at the mix here, our voters had Grand Valley coming on back into the mix with what probably will stand as their best win of this campaign over Michigan Tech, wouldn't you say?
I think when you have to look at it as the collective, yeah, that probably is going to stand out as their best win. And make no mistake, I mean, Michigan Tech, um, played a really, really good out of conference schedule, got good wins over.
Yep.
Obviously, we know Bemidji isn't the same this year, but you didn't know that going in, and they were able to take care of business there. Hillsdale isn't, an elite team within the GMAC, but still a solid team that you got to play well to be able to beat. And Tech went on the road to go get that win. And then, hey, Davenport on the road, we've seen often enough now where, the Panthers play a physical style of football, and that's just no gimme for anybody. Ask Saginaw Valley about that. And then, I think if there's any game on the schedule that Tech might want to have back, it's Ferris. I mean, they turned the ball over 5 times in the first half.
Yeah.
And still we're only down, I think, 21-3.
Exactly
21-0. Right. So it's like, that's a Tech team that is a good football team. Coach Metlack is really, you can see how year to year, they're just basically kind of stacking things. That's a team that's going to be around, and they've made the playoffs before. So this is, a program that is always going to be good, usually for a winning record at a minimum. And on a good year, they're going to sprinkle in that 9-2 and be able to get into the bracket and then cause some people some pain. So don't be surprised, especially with how much young talent they have at the quarterback position, if Tech's not in the mix here again a year from now.
Yeah, and it kind of felt like the winner of that game was probably going to find their way into the poll. I mean, we had talked about it a fair amount as well. So
yeah, and at 8-2, I think if Tech had won that game, they would be well deserved. I think you're dead on. Yeah.
Taking a look as we kind of go forward now. Here is our slate for the upcoming week. We kind of talked about Tech a moment ago. They'll be hosting Saginaw Valley in what should be a very competitive game. I hate to say it this way. I'm curious what Saginaw team's going to show up.
Nailed it.
Are they going to be the one that had the dog in them to be up 24-7 against Ferris, or is there going to be a hangover and a disappointment coming into this and not a lot to play for? And because they didn't end the season well last year.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that when we get to the tape slide.
Yeah. And we've got Ferris heading on over to Davenport, which an interesting matchup. Davenport's not going to want to just they're going to want to end the season well and be able to take down the champ. That would be this is their big moment at the end here. You got Roosevelt going on into Grand Valley. And then you've got Wayne State heading to Northern Michigan. So, Tony, let's go ahead and jump right on into the games. And he flipped them on me, and he went, let's go Northern Michigan first. So, Northern Michigan and Wayne, you feel like, I'm having a hard time feeling like there's a reason for me to pick Wayne State right now. And,
I am right there with you. I am right there with you.
And I'm not taking a shot at him, but when you're scoring 11 points a game,
not at all. And they are scoring 11 points a game. The other thing that I think you got to take a look at, this is a team that defensively kind of stayed in it with Tiffin earlier in the year. And they obviously gave Findlay, who's undefeated, probably the closest. I think it's the closest game. Well, let's see. Findlay beat Indy maybe by 3. So second closest game that they had all year.
Was able to do an investigation on that game because we don't know what happened.
Right. So they're going to, Wayne was able to get down in the gutter with Findlay and keep that game. I think it was a 7-3 final. So, but the problem I think is that there are a couple of key guys on that Wayne defense that have been getting hurt. And so they've been having to throw some younger guys in there. And those are some of the guys that they were really expecting to lean on that they haven't been able to have. So that's a defense that's been more of a work in progress as the season has worn on than I think the Warriors were anticipating it would be. And you're starting to see it show up, and they've given up, I think, 100 points in the last 2 weeks, 108 points. So it's this is going to be a tough road to hoe, and then obviously being able to contain the option when it's the only time all year you've seen it.
I'm sure they're thrilled about that proposition.
Right. So, so I would say that this is going to be could be another big day for Mr. Dobert. And
You go from playing a pass-happy squad with Roosevelt,
yeah,
and then they go to throw on the film, and now we get to face the Veer. Who's ready for that?
yeah, right, exactly. So
you get a whole lot of tackling between the tackles. Let's go on this, but yeah.
Right. So and Northern, let's face it, their 2 wins have both been on the road. And so I'd be willing to wager that those kids are actually pretty hyped up to try and, hit the pay window in front of their home fans and their family and friends and whatever else. So I think Northern's going to come out fired up in this game, and I'm with you. I got a hard time seeing the Warriors being able to get the Schneid taken care of on this one. I'm fearful for them that it carries over into next year.
Yeah, and Dog mentions this. I mean, it sure does feel like Northern's going to walk away with their 3rd win of the season. You know what? Good for those kids. They've had some dark days leading up into this point. So
for sure.
Pretty cool to see. But Roosevelt heading on into Grand Valley, and boy, I tell you, when I pull up the slide, the first thing I think of, Tony, is Grand Valley is going to come after the quarterback. Because if they're used to throwing for approaching 300 yards a game, the best way to stop that is to make them not be able to get those throws off.
Right.
And I feel like something like that, Tony, is a driving factor in how this ball game goes.
I think that's a part of it. I don't know that if Roosevelt's going to be able to have what they're going to need in terms of either being able to adjust some of their game to be able to be more quick and some of their passes, because that is, when you watch them, they like to push the ball downfield a little bit. I mean, they're not throwing bombs every play, but it's not West Coast, right? It's not quick out,
sure,
that kind of stuff. They'll do some of that, and that's actually one of the things I will say. The big yardage chunks they get tend to be when they push the ball down the field. But one thing that they were doing to Wayne in this last game that Wayne just never seemed to adjust to was the quick stand up and throw it to the sideline. And you might have 2 guys lined up to one side and they're immediately just blocking. And the 3rd guy or the back is leaked out there and he's catching it and just trying to follow the block. So it was basically almost like, boundary screens and whatnot. And some of those worked pretty well and they added up over time. But when they got the big hits, it was when they were trying to push the ball down the field. So, can Grand Valley, their ability to tackle is going to be tested in this game if Roosevelt continues to employ that same type of thing. But again, if they do try to push the ball down the field at all, then obviously pass protection is going to be the other thing. I think the other thing to look at in this game too is, can this be a kind of cure what ails you situation for the Grand Valley run game? I mean, when you've got a rushing defense that's given up, almost 3 bills a game, you got to figure the Lakers are going to try and at least figure out how to get themselves a decent run game going in this one.
Well, I think if you're Grand Valley, you've got 2 thoughts: is let's finish the season strong in a get right game offensively.
Yep.
And at the same time, if you go ahead and you end up winning by a pretty sizable margin, it's only going to help you all the more with the idea of potentially trying to get your foot in the door for that conversation of who's in the top 8 in the super region.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're at this point right now where there is some level of hope if you get a bunch of help. And there's plenty. We've talked about this for weeks. If you have 3 losses, you're living on hope, and hope that last week something goes crazy. And all you can do is make a strong accounting for yourself and see where things land.
You got it. You got it. And it's amazing how many years we've seen it too. And it seems like not to send strays your way, but it does seem like the Northern Sun is where every year there are at least 2 teams on the last day of the season where I go, how in the hell did they lose that game? And
there's some interesting matchups in the Northern Sun.
And there are. And so that almost sounds like I'm knocking the league. I think maybe that's more of a compliment to them that they schedule things in a way where stuff's crazy for all 11 weeks. And hey, what more can you ask for?
I've said this for a while. I mean, because of the fact that it's a conference that's in the same region, obviously, with the GLIAC, there is not a fire-breathing dragon in the Northern Sun.
Yeah.
There's a handful of good teams, and the middle can punch up pretty well with them, as we saw with Wayne State, for example,
100%.
out of Nebraska. So But we'll talk about that here soon enough. But you know, Joe mentions here, hoping that Grand Valley players haven't checked out. I don't think that that's maybe I'm crazy, but I don't think that that's the case. We're here at the last game of the season. They know that despite the fact things haven't gone like they would have wanted to, and let's be honest, there was a few weeks ago that was pretty dark times for Grand Valley in this program.
And they haven't had back-to-back losses in Allendale in a while.
Right. And to at least have a shot, an outside shot at the playoffs. And I mean, we're not saying it's a great chance, but you know what? The fact that they still have a chance right now, I think if I was on the football, I'd have a little energy about that.
Sure.
So, we'll see.
I think if the kids had been checked out this past Saturday is when we would have seen it.
Agreed.
And they had chances in that game where things just kind of kept not going the way they wanted them to, where they could have folded and not find a way to close out, Tech, but they did.
Fair point.
Yep.
Ferris State, Davenport. And Davenport, help me out, Tony. They have one less game played because they had one with Lincoln, was it, that got canceled?
Yes, the traveling rove of Lincoln. Yes. Gosh, I forget what
the club team. Lincoln,
the club team. I forget what their mascot is.
Yes.
But the one out of San Francisco, they canceled the game. Yep.
Yes, that's why. Okay.
And this is Davenport closing out the home slate. This is their fourth straight week being at the farm for their game. So they've been able to try and enjoy some not having to travel so much, because the first half of the season was brutal for them. They were going everywhere.
Now, they're a team that you mentioned it before. They're a team that can be physical. They're also a team that I think at times can have a high ceiling. I mean, we saw what they did with Saginaw.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean,
and this is a team that I think part of what their struggle was maybe a little bit against Northern the second time around. The strength of Davenport's defense is their secondary. And when you're facing a team that wants to run the ball 65 times a game, your secondary, they get to make a lot of tackles, but that's it. What they're good at isn't of any real value.
Right.
Might see a little bit more of that in this game.
I'll be curious to see
their ability to defend the pass. So then the question becomes, can they tackle in space?
Yeah, I mean, if Davenport can go ahead and kind of sell out to the run and say, listen, we're going to make you throw the ball, because there's not that many teams that can physically slow Ferris down to the point where you can try and even entertain that idea.
Right.
If they were to do that, I'm not convinced that their offense has the firepower to do what they need to in this, but I think Davenport could make this a game, the kind of game Ferris doesn't want to have to play.
I would agree with that. And I think so, Davenport, again, the back end is where their strength is. Their front on defense, I think, is good enough to at least slow Ferris down some in that straight ahead run game of theirs. So I think Ferris's advantage is if they can get out on the edge and get some guys in space where they one-on-one and have to force Davenport to make tackles. That's where it's going to be, I think, a little bit dicey for Davenport, and that's where Ferris is going to have to execute in that regard. But I'm with you. If Ferris is able to stretch this out, particularly early with 2 or 3 scores, Davenport's inconsistency in terms of the offensive output, particularly in the pass game, I think that's what concerns me. Now, again, we've seen Ferris be maybe a little leaky on that back end. And Keontae Nixon's had some nice games for Davenport this year, and he's a guy who's he could be 1-on-2, and he's gonna find a way to outmaneuver you for the ball. Yeah. And so Ferris is gonna have to be cognizant of that and probably be willing to accept the fact that Davenport's gonna make a couple of plays that way. But is it the type of thing that they can consistently count on it?
Right.
That's where I wonder if it's just not quite enough. So I think Ferris is the favorite here. But again, this is a second straight game against an assistant who knows what you want to do. And these Davenport kids, especially after losing a game that they're probably not real happy about this past weekend, I bet you they come out fired up. So this this one could actually be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, they've been interesting last few weeks. They beat Saginaw, then they lose to Northern, and now they got to play Ferris. So
yeah.
Now, I thought this was an interesting question here. In regards to the starting quarterback spot, my initial thought is that Wyatt Bauer, that Coach Shanice pumps some air back in his tires and rolls him out there again and says, "You're our guy, and we need you to go ahead and show that again this week."
Yeah,
that's my initial hunch. What's yours?
Exactly the same. I would be floored if Wyatt Bauer doesn't start this game.
Okay.
Now, with that said, the one thing I will challenge Wesley on this with a little bit is to classify Chase Carter as a backup.
Right.
I think you're if you're a fan or a coach who's going to look at it that way, you're doing so at your own peril. Because
he's kind of a 1B with them because he's played a lot of football.
You're darn right he has, and so. That's not your standard backup situation that you're used to seeing.
Yeah. It reminds me of some of the other situations we've seen with teams that we've talked about throughout the year. And I'll selfishly mention the Northern Sun. I've got Northern State, who's had a terrific offense this year. They have very successfully done the 1A, 1B. Mankato's done that for years.
Yeah,
I think we're starting to see a little bit of a slow shift to the idea, which I know Tony is more than comfortable with, which is this is another athlete on the field. I'm not going to coddle him. I am going to play him as a ball carrier, and if he gets dinged up, the next guy's ready to go.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think he sees that a little differently than some other head coaches. I really do.
For sure. Yeah, this is absolutely not a Joe Burrow goes down and Jake Browning's got to come in type of situation. That is don't mistake that. Doubt. So
yeah. And you know what Wesley, in bringing that up, we don't talk about a lot about kind of their second quarterbacks on a lot of these teams because Wyatt Bauer frankly gets the headlines, and the way Ferris has blasted some teams, they've had a chance to stretch their legs a little bit, and get a whole lot of guys in. And Chase Carter's done a really nice job. And I think if Wyatt Bauer went down and they had to play the playoffs with Chase, they're still going to be the favorite. Yeah. Because he can still do a lot of good things, and they've got so many weapons on that offense to help him out too.
For sure. And well, I think based on the intel you and I were gathering throughout the offseason, we kind of felt like Wyatt Bauer was the guy, but we also kind of knew that if he was the guy, he would have earned it because we knew Chase Carter was 100% in that mix, and you kind of still felt like Coach Anise really felt like he could win with either guy.
No doubt. Mm-hmm. No doubt. So with that said, Carson Gulker will be your starting quarterback.
Hey, we've seen Coach Anise do plenty of kooky stuff over the years, man. That would not surprise me in the least.
Coach Anise is watching the show. Why didn't I think of that?
I'm sure he probably has.
Yeah. I don't think there's a lot of things that I've thought of that he hasn't in regards to his football team.
I guarantee you there isn't anything I've thought
of. Saginaw heading into Michigan Tech. To take your guess on who's going to win this game. You know what? I honestly will tell you this. Whoever comes in, this is going to be a motivation is key game. I really will. I think.
Oh yeah.
Are we playing out the string and turn our equipment in Monday, or are we trying to finish strong, prove the team we can be? Saginaw's trying to play for a winning campaign. 100%. I mean, if they finish 5-6, how weird would that feel with them beating Grand Valley and taking Ferris to overtime?
Yeah, right.
I mean, it was like, what bizarre world is that? And then Michigan Tech, we're going to see here in a moment, despite the loss to Grand Valley, they're not totally out of the picture yet.
Correct.
Which is weird. So I think we have some of our motivation right there. I feel this is more about which Saginaw team comes on out. And that's just me saying that personally, because I've seen their ceiling and their floor.
Well, and I think, let's face it, the other reason you're saying that is you've seen the ceiling and the floor, meaning that we've seen Saginaw look really, really good some games and really, really not so good in some games. Whereas with Michigan Tech, they're usually relatively predictable. You're kind of, what you see is what you get with those guys. You kind of know what they're going to do. Much more steady. Yes, great adjective. So, and similarly, as much as this might seem dumb, 8-3 sounds a lot cooler than 7-4. So yes. I really feel like Tech's got similar, just record motivation. Obviously, I think they want to win at home. I think the only other kind of intangible to this game is Saginaw is okay, how bad of a taste in the mouth do they have, not only from this season, but also from last season's game? Because Saginaw went into week 11 last year still with an outside shot of making the bracket and had Tech down, I want to say it was 22 points or something like that going into the fourth quarter. And somehow let Tech go back up to the UP with the win. And so I don't know if they've even got motivation just to say, damn it, we got to correct what happened in that game last year. We're not doing that again. But again, we've seen steady Tech and roller coaster Saginaw. So it's like, well, how motivated is Saginaw going to be, and is that going to be enough?
No doubt, no doubt.
So yeah, this game, all kinds of interesting.
Yeah.
I'll be doing a lot of flipping around between a bunch of these.
Well, and we're going to break down here momentarily for the teams that are in the GLIAC that are still kind of on the outside looking in, Michigan Tech and Grand Valley. Mm-hmm. I'm going to kind of pull back the curtain and show you guys a little bit more of how I see this here as kind of a, pseudo bracketologist type of guy here. Now, this is, first of all, the results of what came out Monday, very, very late. And I was unhappy with how late, but we'll get into that. There'll be another show on that. But, there was some talk that Findlay might be on the one line. And you know what, Tony, you can make a case with their numbers, given the KPI they have. Mm-hmm. You can absolutely make a case for that. Mm-hmm. I just think that there was some sense of common sense that ruled out in the room and said, yeah, but would we really think that they would beat Ferris State? And if the answer to that's no, then let's just go ahead and leave good enough alone on that. And then moving down from there, Ashland loses, but ends up staying on that 4 line because it's a quality loss in regard to it helps their SOS. It didn't hurt their KPI much at all. Right. And, so they're still ahead of Duluth, who only has one setback. Duluth's at the 5 line, but Duluth, they have one loss, but their strength of schedule is low in this company. Yeah. If you're under 500 for your SOS, you're fighting an uphill battle with your strength of schedule.
100%.
As we continue down the page, I was at the Minnesota State Augustana game. Minnesota State went ground and pound on them. And Augustana's freshman quarterback finally looked like a freshman, and they had some turnovers, and Mankato took advantage of them, which we would expect them to do. Now, Mankato is sitting on the 6th line. The surprise to me in the release was Upper Iowa. All of a sudden, they didn't get love a week ago. They were on the 9 line, if I'm not mistaken. And they had Truman in front of them, who has been a tiebreaker. Well, they had very similar results, but all of a sudden the committee said, yeah, we like you a lot better this week, Upper Iowa. And so I'm assuming what they did was they said, you know what, you're not right next to each other in our standings, so we're going to give Upper Iowa the benefit of the doubt. That's my only thought. Now, Tony, I got to be honest with you. When I do my Northern Sun show, when we throw Upper Iowa on the 7 line, there's a lot of Henrying going on because, it's no different than what you guys experienced with the GLIAC, where some teams left the league and now find themselves in the top 10 here. And there's maybe some hesitation or some doubt that would they really beat that next group of teams, maybe from each of those respective conferences? Certainly in Northwood fits that description themselves. Got two teams wearing light blue uniforms, both kind of getting that same thought, you know. Now, that said, Augustana's in a precarious spot here. They've only got one loss, but they also have the lowest strength of schedule on the page.
Yep.
And they're only 2-1 against 500 or better. Their KPI is not strong. You know, they scheduled, you know, the Griffins from Mo West to start the year, and they've been terrible.
Yeah.
So they hurt them in their SOS right there.
And I'm sure the Fighting Dyksters weren't planning on having such a crummy year, and it's definitely not helping.
Yes.
Augustana.
Yes, that's been a few miles of bad road for him.
That's right.
You know, so the first off, before we take a look at where the GLIAC teams, kind of on what we're going to call page 2 of this, there is some huge games coming up this week that kind of might open the door. And that's Augustana has got to go down and play at Wayne State, Nebraska.
No gimme.
They're a 6-4 club who's actually got a really good KPI because they just whooped Sioux Falls this last week at Sioux Falls.
Yep.
And they kind of handled Mankato 2 weeks previous. Not exactly a lot of teams who have that kind of thing on their resume. And so they look pretty darn good, and they're playing great defensive football, the best defensive team in the Northern Sun, and they have a strong running game. And Augustana's got to go and all of a sudden pick up the pieces in a hurry and win a game down there.
Right. Yeah, and it's amazing to think that Augustana could go from being undefeated after 9 weeks and possibly, 13 days later, 14 days later, not even be in the bracket.
Oh,
but if they don't go down to Wayne and handle things, that's what they're facing.
They were heading into last weekend 9-0.
Yeah.
48 hours later, the regional rankings were coming out, and they were on thin ice.
Yep.
Wild. Yep. So, but that's how quickly some of this can change, especially when you have a low SOS. That happens.
Well, and just talk a little bit more about that too, just for the folks who maybe not be aware. It's very similar to how people have to think back, maybe 10 or 15 years within the GLIAC to when the GLIAC had 11 or 12 teams in it, and then it was bumped up to 14 teams, and then you had 16, and then you had that stretch of time where it was 15 teams. And you could play a 9 or a 10 game GLIAC schedule, but if the scheduling of the various pods fell the right way, you could end up playing 4 or 5 teams outside of your pod, and they could all be teams that won, let's say 3 games or less.
Right.
And all of a sudden you played all conference games, maybe one outside of conference, but your strength of schedule would be 470. Well, whereas if the schedule fell just right, you could play a bunch of tough teams that did better, and all of a sudden you played a conference schedule the next year, but your strength of schedule's 540. And so I think that's what you're seeing in the Northern Sun, right? I mean, Augustana kind of got that slightly softer draw, whereas a Mankato's was much stronger, as was Wayne's.
They had 2 teams in the North that each team, like in the South, like Augustana. So Augustana doesn't play 2 North teams. And those 2 North teams were Duluth and Moorhead.
There you go.
2 of the stronger teams in the overall record there. So some people will say, well, they didn't get a chance to play them. Well, if they did, maybe they would have lost too.
Who knows?
So it goes both ways.
You could see Duluth's a 9-win team, and Moorhead's won 7 games this year?
Yeah, and we're going to see them on the page here in a moment.
Okay.
Because ironically, you just mentioned Mankato a moment ago. Mankato's they host Minnesota State. They host Jack Strand and company.
Oh, so that's
an interesting ball game.
There's no gimme for them either.
No, I mean, all of a sudden, if they lose, they got 3 setbacks now.
Right.
Now, they're kind of like Pitt, though, in Super Region 4, where they are one of the stronger strength of schedule teams.
Correct. And playing Moorhead isn't going to do anything but help that.
Right. And the fact that they hammered Northwest Missouri State, that win has only aged better and
Oh my
better.
goodness, tell me about it.
So, and the fact they didn't just beat them, but they won handily. So
Yeah.
that's driving their KPI, which at 244 is a very high number for a 2-loss squad.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So you take a look at all of this, and this is going to sound dumb. Mankato might lose to Moorhead and still get in the field.
Yeah. No, that
Which
doesn't
is the
sound
same
dumb at all.
situation Pitt might be in the other super
Yep.
region.
For
So
sure.
we'll have to see this all play out. But you know what, Tony, I mentioned before the show, Northwood's just laying in the weeds there. And
catbirding it. Yep.
Because if Upper Iowa has to play at Indianapolis.
Yep. No
Well,
gimme.
you know what? I mean, you could probably make a case that Upper Iowa might be a 2-touchdown underdog heading on into that if we take a look at recent results.
Mm-hmm.
And so if Upper Iowa loses that ball game, you got Northwood hanging out right there saying, hey, how about me for that 8 line?
Yeah.
And if Augustana loses, we got even more chaos.
And we were talking about the same thing. So, the counter to that is Upper Iowa can say, well, okay, our strength of schedule is going to go up because we're playing an 8-1 Indianapolis team.
Right.
And so even if we lose that and it's on the road, our strength of schedule goes up and our KPI probably ought to go up, especially if we play them tight. The problem you're going to have is they're going to be 1-2, presuming they don't have any other teams that they beat that might creep their way up to 500 by
which
the end
isn't
of the
a good
season.
look for a playoff team.
Correct. And then Northwood's got Walsh on Saturday, who's already won 6 games. So It is absolutely going to give them, if Northwood were to win, their strength of schedule is going to go up that pinch, and they'd have at least 4 wins against teams over 500. I don't know how you take Upper Iowa over Northwood in that situation if they're both sitting there at 8-2. Or no, Upper Iowa, they actually wouldn't Northwood end up having an extra win too? Yeah, no.
Yep. Yeah,
Northwood would end up having 9 wins.
Upper Iowa played Drake. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that game didn't count against them.
So you're right. Northwood actually's got to feel pretty good about where they're sitting. And
which means that they'll lose to Walsh this week.
Right? Yeah, right. Yeah. They're big Indianapolis Greyhounds fans once they figure out if they can figure out how to take care of their own business first.
And I know, and I'm Joe is saying stop poking the bear here. He said this discussion just frustrates me more about GV, not getting in. To be fair, and I don't disagree necessarily that Grand Valley should be in this conversation, but we're going to look in a moment at their numbers, and there's good and bad with the Grand Valley numbers here in just a moment. They got a nice bump because they were down in mid to late teens in the overall. If we're going to kind of play it on out to about 20, but then they cut that gap quite a bit, Tony. And if we were to take a look right here now. I used, this is from our guy Inkblot. I took just a screenshot from his page. He does a tremendous job accumulating all the data and doing a whole lot of forecasting as well. And he's been a real asset, frankly, to everything that's done in regards to the compilation of this stuff.
Right.
And, he and I are friends, and we will chat during this part of the year a few times a week just to kind of bounce things off each other. You've seen it this way, that kind of thing. And Tony, if we take a look at that 1 through 10 on the left-hand side of the column, it goes all the way to Truman. Then from there, we are sorting the data here by KPI from there. Because I think, Tony, I can say very confidently, the KPI has been the single biggest driving factor in these numbers when we look at them week to week.
Sure.
And if you took KPI and then you also took a look at the column for win percentage plus SOS, and there's a column where they get ranked for that as well. If I took a look, for example, at Michigan Tech is 11th in the strength of schedule plus win percentage, and they're 11th also, in that PI, which I don't think it used a whole lot. But then further on the right, they're 12th in KPI. So for losing, they're still in a pretty okay spot right there.
Yeah.
Now, when I look at 1 and 3 against 500 or better, That's a little tough to swallow there for Michigan Tech.
Yep.
Now, directly below them is where Grand Valley is. Grand Valley is 13th in the win plus strength of schedule, and they are 13th in KPI. The challenge that Grand Valley has is they don't have an opponent that's going to help them stay here or move up higher because they've got Roosevelt next.
Yeah. Yep.
And so it's almost like when you get to here, you run the risk of that's where you peak.
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
how it's going to be hard to move up.
And I think the other thing too is if you're a Grand Valley fan, you're probably looking at that KPI and asking, well, how is it not higher? Simply from the standpoint that, okay, yeah, you got the 3 losses, as you can see, against the teams that are over 500 in there. But those 3 losses, 2 of them were on the road, and they were by a combined, I think, 11 points. So it sure seems like, you look at Tech's got 3 losses, and one of those losses was by what, 28?
Right.
So it's like, how does Tech's KPI end up being higher than Grand Valley's at that point? I think that's something that I think folks would look at that and say, how does that work?
I think the biggest challenge that the GLIAC teams have is that out of conference, the GLIAC did not do as good this year as we would have anticipated based on years past.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes down to things like strength of schedule, those other teams from those other conferences that are beating them in those games kind of get pumped up as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you take a look at an Upper Iowa, for example.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that win over Tech is helping them volumes. Yeah. I'm sure.
Absolutely it is.
And that was at Tech.
I don't think it's hard to see that if Michigan Tech had won that football game and Upper Iowa, obviously wouldn't have the credit for it there, Michigan Tech would probably be right on the doorstep at this point.
Well, I can't imagine that Tech wouldn't be in and Upper Iowa wouldn't be.
Well, Upper Iowa's only got the 1 defeat and Tech's got 3 at this point. But
correct, but they'd be both sitting there with 2.
Exactly.
And Tech would have head-to-head if their resumes were similar enough.
It's a pretty common thing when you have a 3-loss squad that you always can look back and say, if it hadn't had this one game, we would have probably been in the dance.
Yeah.
And for Grand Valley, that's going to be the Saginaw game.
Well, and you could argue the Ferris game too.
Sure.
Because, they had 3 drives in that game where they got to the 30 or closer and came in with 0 points.
Yeah.
Most of those were mistakes of their own. They weren't things that Ferris did. So, they're probably looking at both those games going nuts.
Right. Well, and so as we take a look at these numbers here, the other thing to kind of take notice of is the strength of schedule for both of those is they're both under 500 right there. Grand Valley's is going to go down a little further because of Roosevelt. So that's going to hurt them there.
Yeah.
But then
Tex will go up slightly.
Right.
Because one of Saginaw's losses was to New Haven, who's FCS.
Right. Now, Grand Valley, I'm going to say this just like I mentioned earlier with Augustana when they played Mo West. They assumed that they were going to be about a 500 team based on recent past.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't. They were a 1-win team or whatever they have.
Yep.
Grand Valley had one like that too, called Black Hills State.
Yes, they did.
And Black Hills State has been that kind of team for them, a team that's been a 6-7 winish team year after year.
And was coming off a good season last year.
Right. And then all of a sudden now they played the first half of the year very good against Sioux Falls, against, Grand Valley and some other squads. I think that physically they ran out of steam after some of those contests, and they weren't able to get to the pay window, and it ends up hurting a Grand Valley in that case. If Grand Valley has their out-of-conference opponent, Black Hills, at 500 or better, Grand Valley's probably sitting right around 500 themselves right now.
Could be.
So there's a lot of things to kind of, digest here and soak in. But if you're a Grand Valley or Michigan Tech fan and you're looking at how do we have an angle, it's you want to see Augustana. Well, I would say you want to see Augustana lose, but guess what? That'll only pump up Wayne State, who's already in the conversation themselves. So, but they've got 4 defeats. So I still think you probably want Augustana to lose if you're in that spot.
Yeah.
You want to see Upper Iowa lose. You want to see Northwood lose. You need to see some of those at the bottom there drop a game, just so the conversation itself come Sunday has to be much different than it currently is.
Right.
So,
one thing that I would love to see more about too is what Inkblot or what the numbers say on Saginaw Valley, because I'm seeing some 5-5 teams in here.
Yep.
So they're 5-4 against D2. Outside of the GLIAC, Gannon's not helping them, but Northeastern State is, and so is Northwood. So
you know what? While you're chatting, I'm going to pull that on up here, Tony.
Yeah, their strength of schedule numbers got to be halfway decent.
At face value, I'm going to agree with that. But at the same time, I'll give the numbers credit because they don't lie, whatever they are. So let's see.
I'm sure of that, but I mean, I'm looking at Winona at Walsh at 484. Yeah, maybe they're just not. Maybe they're just because I think Gannon only won once, but Northeastern State's above 500, and then again, I would think Northwood would cancel out Gannon.
Saginaw's 21st. So they were literally right
the next
below.
one. Okay, gotcha.
Yep,
all right,
exactly. Yeah, and their strength of schedule overall 493 at the moment. 1-4 against 500 or better, and
yeah, there you go.
But yeah, so this though is we wanted to go ahead and be able to kind of fully speak to as clear a picture as we could for what the GLIAC teams are looking at coming in this final week. Whether it's good or bad, we're very transparent on this show, as you guys already know. So, and the other thing I didn't mention, remember I talked about Moorhead before. Moorhead's a little further down that page than I was thinking they were going to be. Okay. But you know what? Their strength of schedule, Moorhead is 449, and KPI is 16. So they would not have to just beat Mankato, but they would have to beat Mankato by about 30 to probably get themselves in that mix. So
maybe 130.
Right. So, but you know what? Once again, you have 3 losses, win a big game, get yourself in the conversation, and see where it goes. So,
well, and this is great fun to be able to have this conversation with. So I'm grateful that we've got the data to be able to do it. And this is the same time of year. When I wrote the column, I got into practice of I'm only going to give you what I think can happen headed into week 11. So this is the only time that I would ever really give a serious talk or spend any time writing out what I thought some of the scenarios were, because and I've said this before, my opinion has always been that my opinion has always been the fact that they release rankings after weeks 8 and 9 is just a waste of time, because this is the only one where you're really seeing something that actually has okay, the if-thens are a little bit more finite, and it's much more something you could talk about. It's kind of fun to theorize things earlier in the season, but this is the only one to me that you've got some real value. Okay, you look at this and you say, okay,
sure,
if Findlay and Ferris are in, no matter what they do. Indianapolis, it gets a little dicey for them, but probably a good chance they're in no matter what they do. You get past those 3, they still got to take care of some business.
Well, and Tony and I have kind of talked about some of the things that we think are kind of a foregone conclusion. If we have alluded to any of those things, this is right about that time where Upper Iowa will go into Indy,
right,
and win, and all of a sudden we're going to be saying
Indianapolis isn't even in the. You're right.
Yes, and Duluth is hosting a playoff game.
You got it.
And Upper Iowa is heading back up to Duluth to reacquaint themselves with the Northern Sun. But
that's right. Hey, it wouldn't surprise me.
At this point.
Week 11 is always a bunch of crazy, man.
It is. It's who can finish strong when it really matters at that moment.
Never seems to let you down.
Well, buddy, we will be, just for everyone kind of wondering what's next for us for coverage coming up. We will be on Sunday evening. We will go ahead and talk about the field that is, because we will know by that point. I mean, heck, Tony, they'll probably the field of teams will probably only have been out about an hour.
Yeah.
So we won't even we'll be making picks on games that we haven't even had a chance to think through or consider. But don't worry, we're okay being held accountable for it. And then then we'll go ahead next week and we will start to unveil our super region shows. So Tony and I will go ahead and be looking at the super region that we just looked at a moment ago and breaking down the games. It's probably going to be a whole lot of Northern Sun against GMAC based on what we're seeing right now.
Could be.
And then, from there, we will have some of our other shows like the Super Region 1, 2, and 3. We haven't quite landed on exactly what some of the other ones look like yet. We're kind of, figuring that out here. We don't need to until next week, but just want to make sure everyone kind of knows what's happening next. We won't have the conventional, conference shows like we normally would. Except for Tom and I on the Northern Sun. Tom wanted to do one last show where we do an awards show.
Oh boy,
on the Northern Sun. So if you've been missing that in your podcast variety, that's what's coming up on Monday.
Well,
so
mazel tov to you and Tom for doing that. I am
right.
I am not that sophisticated.
Well, he was wanting to do that, and I said, "Oh, if you're gonna come up with that stuff, I can get on board." So,
all right, beautiful.
Well, Tony, have yourself a great weekend, and all of our viewers. Thanks for tuning in, everybody in the comments.
Yep.
Thanks for adding a little flavor to us as well.
Thanks, everybody. We sure appreciate you watching.
We will see you guys at the games.